Critical to an outstanding role the Emirates has been performing is the collaboration it has formed with the United States of America. This has spanned many decades and was done in tandem with every American presidential administration, whether a Democrat or a Republican. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has steered away from this foreign policy consensus to cooperate with the United Arab Emirates. Regrettably, it has been inclined to vow to remedy its relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Understandably, the Biden administration has alienated all of the nations who are friends of the United States in the Gulf region.
You know, everybody knew Russia was going to veto the UN Security Council resolution. So an abstention or even a vote in favor of the Russian position had no practical impact. So the UAE could do that without any practical importance. And they voted against Russia in the General Assembly, which, you know, nobody has a veto there. But as a political thing, I think that they are trying to send a message to the United States. There has been a little bit of friction in the relationship between the U.S. and the UAE. You know, first off, you have you know, when President Biden came to power, a large part of his party wants to shift the focus in the Gulf towards human rights away from security. I think the UAE is very concerned about the revived JCPOA talks that, you know, as they felt in 2015 that the United States was sacrificing their security interests without adequately consulting with them. And I think that, you know, you saw friction that has stopped. I think it's paused, not dead, but stopped the proposed sale of Reaper drones and the Joint Strike Fighter to the UAE under the Biden administration. And then the UAE is unhappy with the United States, the Biden administration decision to remove the Houthis, not from the terrorism list, but from the economic sanctions for terrorism list, which they wanted that, you know, done. And I think in the wake of the missile attacks on Abu Dhabi, I think the Emiratis, you know, wanted the United States to play an active role against the Houthis, which isn't going to happen regardless of who the president is. So I think this was a way to, without any real political or security cost, remind the United States that they have options, they shouldn't be taken for granted, and that their security concerns are serious to them.
The United Arab Emirates began its presidency of the UN Security Council for the month of March, and nothing occupies the whole world but the Russian-Ukrainian war and the repercussions of the exciting political chapters that emerged from this war, the last of which is the vote of more than 140 countries against the invasion, as well as the expulsion of the American ambassador from Russia.
I'd say based on the performance of the Russian army in Ukraine, Putin's nightmare is coming true, not his dreams. He has never been in as precarious a situation since he came to power. But it's clear that, you know, Putin's vision, which, you know, I was at the Munich Security Conference in 2007 where he gave his speech and laid it out and basically said, look, you know, I want the security sphere, the sphere of influence that the former Soviet Union had. And we all kind of shuffled that off and said, you know, what a crazy Russian. This is for domestic thing. But his position domestically is imperiled. The bigger issue is, you know, it's clear that Putin felt that in the wake of the Afghan withdrawal and President Biden's domestic agenda cratering, he looked and he said, I won't have a better chance. You know, look at all the main Western leaders. Biden is old. You know, sometimes he says things that just don't make sense. He's had a huge domestic failure. He's had a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Boris Johnson in the UK is hanging on by his fingertips because he held alcoholic booze-up parties in 10 Downing Street while they were supposed to be under quarantine. Emmanuel Macron is facing a real difficult election. You've got a new German chancellor who nobody knows anything about, but he's, you know, at a weak coalition. So we thought this was the time to take advantage. You know, it appears that the guys who get a vote that count are the Ukrainians. And quite frankly, everybody has a much lower opinion of Russian military might than they did 3 weeks ago, just because of their poor performance. So the question is, what's the role of the United States? Well, a couple of things to bear in mind. First off, the United States has never been an ally of Ukraine. They're security partners. We've provided some assistance to them, but we don't have an obligation to defend them. Even the Gulf Cooperation Council states, they are not allies either. They're security partners. But the Carter Doctrine, has said, look, if an outside power tries to take it over, we will repel them by force. And that was put to the test when Iraq invaded Kuwait. We've never done an equivalent thing like that for NATO. We've actually, NATO, where we have a treaty, we've never had to exercise it with allies the way we have with our security partners in the Gulf Cooperation Council. So I don't think anybody should doubt the U.S. commitment. But perceptions are more important than reality. But at the end of the day, I would say look at capabilities. The United States can move a brigade of soldiers to the Gulf in 24 hours. We have fixed infrastructure to deploy there. We have bases that can be rapidly built up. We don't have to physically be in the Gulf to defend the interests in the Gulf. And we have a worldwide infrastructure that does a lot of things. For example, ask yourself, how were the Emirati radars cued for these ballistic missile intercepts? And the answer, I think, when all is known, is that came from the United States. So, there's a lot of stuff there. And I think that people who doubt the commitment to the Gulf just either don't understand the nature of modern U.S. military power or are misled.
Biden presented the effort to enter renegotiation with Iran as part of what his foreign policy team termed a re-engagement with Iran. Such an approach has proven so far to be detrimental to the Gulf region. Seriously, it is even more harmful to the national security of the United States. Iran had perceived in the push by the American government to negotiate with her signs of weakness. Importantly, the Houthi war in Yemen has impacted negatively the national security of the United Arab Emirates. For no reason, the Emirates, which stands wisely among the nations, finds itself to be hit continuously with armed attacks and terror plots masterminded by al-Houthi and Iran.
So we don't know what's going on in Vienna. I hear that they're very close to a deal. But I've actually been saying for a couple of days now, if they are not very close to a deal, or if they're close to a bad deal, now is the time to cut off the JCPOA talks, because, that would have been the page one news story had they done it, last month. But if they cut it off now, the front page of the newspapers are going to be Ukraine, 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 JCPOA. So if they're not there, or if they have a bad deal, they need to cut bait, and the Biden administration can say, I'm sorry, we tried. I said we'd try. We did. We went as far as we could. Trump messed this up too much to put together, and that will appeal to his base. If there is a deal for the JCPOA, I honestly don't see it giving anybody any real benefit, because the concessions the U.S. will have to make will be politically toxic. There'll be sanctions lifted against people who have done things like directed the bombing in the Marine Corps barracks in Beirut, or the attack on the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires. So, there's not a lot of benefit in there. So I think the JCPOA is a separate issue that has its own momentum. I think the bigger issue is one that people have, there's one that people have talked about a lot, one that they haven't. The first is oil. Obviously, the price of oil has risen drastically. Western countries aren't buying Russian oil. That strengthens the hand of the GCC countries. Oil trades at over $120 a barrel today, which is more than double what it was in the last year of the Trump administration. So there's a budgetary windfall for GCC countries to revitalize their security infrastructure if they wish to do that. And then the second is negative, which is the wheat market. 79% of the wheat consumed in Egypt comes from Russia or Ukraine, 79%. And that wheat produces subsidized bread. And, the last person who tried to eliminate the bread subsidies was Anwar Sadat, and he had riots instantly. So, it's obvious that that's a link to the stability of Egypt. And Egypt is in a very precarious economic situation. It's going to get worse, worse, worse. So I'm concerned about instability in Egypt because of the spike in wheat prices.
The United Arab Emirates has a right to defend herself. It has been taken adequate measures to boost its defense. The Emirates is willing to cooperate with the United States to make peace in the Gulf and the Middle East. Yet the Biden administration has to change its policies. It has to appreciate more the good role of the Emirates, not the bad policies of Iran. This is what the Biden administration must do in its foreign policy toward the Gulf. Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.